The release of this new Commander Legends set brought some big waves to Commander. Fans of Standard were likely less pleased about this set, but they roll around every so often and bring much to the Commander table. In this episode, we're going to go over our top new commons and uncommons in each color that you might have passed by.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Brainstorm MTG.
I'm the Deadeye Navigator.
And I'm the Agent of Treachery. With the arrival of Baldur's Gate, we got to experience a very fresh take on pre-releases, in that this pre-release was a draft. This was interesting to experience and caused a lot of confusion, but was overall quite enjoyable. It gave players a sense of control over what cards they got to pick up and use for the pre-release. One downside, however, was that the pressure to take cards to help your deck was immense. People often gave up some of the more exciting cards from the set.
To start off the list of our favorite commons and uncommons from the set was the color white. This color was more focused towards blink and tokens in the blue-white and green-white color pairings respectively. Before we begin, just a quick disclaimer, we did not include any cards with Myriad in this list due to the fact that Myriad is simply a very powerful mechanic and can make nearly any card immediately stronger.
Firstly, we have Blessed Hippogriff. This easily made the list as a 4-mana, 2/3 Hippogriff with flying, and whenever it attacks, target attacking creature without flying gains flying until end of turn. It also had Adventure, which was a white for an instant that granted target creature indestructible until end of turn. This versatility of all adventure cards, as seen in Throne of Eldraine, proved to be a very strong addition to otherwise mediocre cards.
Next off is Cut a Deal. This one is a 3-mana sorcery for 2 and a white that says each opponent draws a card, then you draw a card for each opponent who drew a card this way. As a cheap way to gain card advantage and even make some friends at the table, this card proved very beneficial to help keep your deck moving while including the whole table. Many were quick to write this card off because it gave benefit to your opponents, but the upside proved to be worth the cost. Then there's your Temple is Under Attack. It's an instant for 2 and a white that says choose one. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn, or you and target opponent each draw 2 cards. Most of the time, I personally seemed to lean towards the card draw, but holding it up for a board wipe can grant you the perfect opportunity to swoop in and steal a win out of nowhere.
Lastly for white is Scouting Hawk. It's 2 and a white for a flying 1/1 that says when this enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for a basic plains and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This finally brought a budget way to ramp in white. It was also a great way to get back into the game after missing a land drop or two. With all the blinking in this set, it helped you to keep up with the green player at the table, earning a solid place on our list.
Next, we have blue. This color contributed to a few interesting archetypes, such as Dragon Beatdown and Blink, and as usual for blue, had a rather strong showing at the pre-release. To kick this off, we have Candlekeep Sage, a legendary enchantment for 2 and a blue, that says commander creatures you own have, when this creature enters or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Obviously, while this card fit extremely well with the Blink archetype, however, on its own, in the 99, it provided great value to your commander.
Feywild Caretaker was our next choice, a 3/4 creature for 4 and a blue that says when Feywild Caretaker enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. At the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, create a 1/1 blue Fairy Dragon creature token with flying. This card made for an easy inclusion, as it guaranteed initiative and some benefit for holding on to it. The fact that it guarantees you a flyer made it much easier to get an initiative back if you lost it. It was also just generally a fun card to play.
Grey Harbor Merfolk is a 0/3 for 1 and a blue that can't be blocked, and it gets +2/+0 as long as you control a commander that's a creature or planeswalker. The reason I love this card is that the worst that it can be is a 2-mana wall, while it isn't the best rate. Having it turn into a 2/3 when your commander is out is amazing compared to the competition for 2-mana unblockables.
Goggles of Night is our final pick for blue and is 1 in a blue for an equipment that equips for 2 and has whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, scry 1, then draw a card. This card was great for adding repeatable card draw to a deck, and some great selection as well. The game plan with this card seemed to be to slap it on a flyer to get some free attacks in.
Thirdly was the color black, which specialized in what black usually does, cause other people pain. To lead off this list, we have Arms of Hadar, which is a sorcery for 3 and a black that has creatures target player controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn. This card was a great option for holding back most token decks, and the fact that you can throw it at one targeted opponent just made it great for dealing with that one player without angering the rest of the table.
Next off was Guildsworn Prowler, a 2/1 Death Toucher that costs 1 and a black and said when Guildsworn Prowler dies, if it wasn't blocking, draw a card, which ended up being great because it was a cheap Death Toucher that also granted card draw when it died after a couple of free attacks. I loved this because instead of it being unable to block, you could just give up the card draw to protect yourself against something that would be otherwise very scary.
Nefarious Imp is a cool new black common. It costs 2 and a black and is a 2/1 flyer. It has whenever one or more permanents you control leave the battlefield, scry 1. This card fits right into an aristocrat's deck or something of the like. Being able to stack your deck how you want isn't something you see very often in black, and the 3-mana barrier keeps it from getting out of hand.
Finally, for black, we have Passageway Seer, a 2/2 lifelinker that costs 3 and a black and reads, whenever Passageway Seer enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. At the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, put a +1/+1 counter on Passageway Seer. This is another card that got you the initiative and helped you keep both it and your life total. Being able to grow your lifelinker is always great, and having that option in black, in my opinion, is a great addition to the set.
On to our following color, red. Red had a lot to do with Dragon Beatdown and also dice rolling. To begin, we have Javelin of Lightning, an artifact with flash that costs 1 in a red and has an equip cost of 4. It reads, when Javelin of Lightning enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. As long as your turn, equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has first strike. This made for a really good aggro option and a way to keep your creature safe from combat damage. The fact that it's equipment rather than an instant made it much better than a lot of the alternatives.
You've Been Caught Stealing is a sorcery for 1 in a red with choose 1. Each creature blocks this turn if able, or you create a treasure token for each opponent who has dealt damage this turn. Both modes of this card are impressive. If you can get a few Death Touchers onto the battlefield, the first mode is absolutely devastating to somebody's board. Dealing damage to each of your opponents won't be hard at all for red, meaning you'll be able to get 2 or 3 treasure whenever you choose the second mode.
Another pick was Coronation of Chaos, a sorcery for 2 and a red that says up to 3 target creatures can't block this turn. Goad them. This made for a cheap and easy way to get your creatures through for damage while protecting yourself from the crackback. Forcing your opponents to swing at each other with their big creatures can get the action in the game moving again.
To end red, we have Swashbuckler Extraordinaire, a 2/2/4/2 and a red that creates a treasure on ETB. It also has the ability, whenever you attack, you may sacrifice 1 or more treasures. When you do, up to that many creatures gain double strike until end of turn. This card is extraordinary at making your bombs do crazy amount of damage. The wording on this card is also worth noting. You don't actually have to attack with Swashbuckler in order to trigger his ability. For the last basic color, we have green. As always, green had a very big showing in both ramp and big stompy creatures, but it had its fair share of interesting new cards. And to kick off our choices is Ambitious Dragonborn, a 0/0 for 3 and a green that enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control and creatures in your graveyard. This card was one of my personal favorites, as it was an easy way to make it feel like your bombs were back on the battlefield again. It's a very unique card that holds a lot of potential, making it an easy choice for this list.
The next card we have lined up is Split the Spoils, a sorcery for 2 and a green with exile up to 5 target permanent cards from your graveyard and separate them into 2 piles. An opponent chooses one of those piles, put that pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. The thing that makes this one really stand out to me is that it's a really interesting twist on the recursion that you see quite often in green. Getting this out after you've built up your graveyard can be a great way to get some bombs straight into your hand.
After that, we have Underseller Mycanoid, A 1/2 for 2 and a green that can tap for 1 mana of any color. On top of that, it also has the ability, whenever Underseller Myconoid enters the battlefield or dies, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. This card is great mana generator that also can give you some tokens as an additional benefit. It's a solid play and a good way to start developing a strong board state.
The final card for green is Cloakwood Swarmkeeper, a 1/1 for a green that has whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Cloakwood Swarmkeeper. This card was able to get very big, very fast in the right deck, and made it a very tough 1-drop to deal with. It's a very dominant early game play, and will likely be included in most green token decks.
Second to last, we have our top multicolored picks, led by Thrakkus the Butcher, who is a 3/4 trampler for 3 and a red and a green, who has the ability, whenever Thrakkus the Butcher attacks, double the power of each dragon you control until end of turn. The fact that text is not exclusive to only dragons that are attacking makes this an incredibly strong card and can be utilized for stuff such as Fling or just plain beatdown. An amazing pick for a commander that will have your opponents quaking.
Another amazing multicolored uncommon is Minthara Merciless Soul. Minthara is a 2 and a white and a black for a 2/2 with word X, where X is the number of experience counters you have. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, you get an experience counter. She also has creatures you control get +1/+0 for each experience counter you have. Needless to say, Minthara is a force to be reckoned with. Because of all the myriad in the set, you'll constantly be having creatures leaving the battlefield. The real problem comes, though, when you try to get Minthara off the battlefield. If left alone too long, the ward X will get to the point where it may as well be hexproof, and your opponents are going to have a tough time dealing with you.
Not straying far from the greedy archetype of Rakdos Treasure is Mahadi Emporium Master. This one's a 3/3 for 1 black and a red, with, at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each creature that died this turn. While Rakdos Treasure is nowhere near rare, having a cheap commander that gets you tons of treasure is a surefire way to get out your awesome high mana creatures that will stomp over your opponent's board to victory.
Kadira, Caller of the Small, was an obvious choice to end off the multicolor list. A 3/3 trampler for 1 and a white and a green that also says, whenever Kadira, Caller of the Small, deals combat damage to a player, for each token you control, create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token. This card is very powerful and poses an immediate threat for anybody it is played against. Not only does it effectively double the amount of tokens you have, but it also has trample, making it not all that difficult to get a hit on a player early in the game to start your tokens going. This card should be dealt with immediately after it has been cast to ensure some safety from its effectiveness.
Last but certainly not least, we have our favorite colorless cards, trumpeted in by Cloak of the Bat, a 2 mana equipment that equips for 2 and grants both flying and haste to the equipped creature. It is a cheap and effective way to get your bombs to hit on the turn you cast them, and also be able to get them to hit through and hit a player due to its giving flying. It's also a great budget option for a haste equipment.
Next to hit the list is Prized Statue, a 2 mana artifact that says when Prized Statue enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a treasure token. Right off the bat, this artifact is pretty much 2 treasures for 2 mana, which is already good value, but when you start to blink it, then it really starts pulling its load, or it could be used as an early game mana fixing. Either way, it's just good value for a budget artifact.
After that, we have Noble's Purse, which is a 2 mana artifact that enters the battlefield with 3 coin counters on it, and has tap and remove 1 coin counter from Noble's Purse to create a treasure token. This artifact is an interesting spin on normal mana rocks and offers the ability to both color fix and ramp. If you can figure a way to get more coin counters on it, then the value just starts stacking. Overall, it's a solid mana rock that gives you treasures.
Finally, we have Campfire, a 1 mana artifact that you can pay 1 and tap it to gain 2 life, or pay 2 mana and tap it to exile Campfire and put all commanders you own from the command zone and from your graveyard into your hand. Then shuffle your graveyard into your library To begin with, this card performed very well at the pre-release, and I found myself just gaining life when I had nothing else to do. It's cheap, and its ability to get your commander back when the commander tax got too expensive made it a great option. It's a great artifact with a lot of uses.
With all the new and exciting cards, there was also a lot of much-needed reprints, such as Lightning Bolt, Skull Clamp, Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves, Basilisk's Collar, Blade of Selves, and many more thrilling options. Overall, this was an amazing set with tons of bombs, but also tons of cool and unique cards that might get passed up on by most players. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to listen for more magic tips and tricks, and as always, we'll keep brainstorming with you.